Morena, everybody, welcome back. We have two workshops this morning. The first of these is on traffic calming. It's following obviously a request from elected members to have a discussion and understand a little bit more about this area. So welcome, Brian, the floor is yours. And obviously we do have the slideshow in our pack, but I'll leave it to you to take away.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Dawn, did you want to say anything? No, you're okay. Very good. So thank you very much, Madam Chair and councillors. So as noted there in the purpose on the first page to provide information to elected members from their request to talk about, why we do traffic calming, what works well, what doesn't, what we've heard from our community and road users, what does it cost, how do we engage with our community before we do works like this, and to look at some Waipā examples of work that we have done in this area. And I've provided a bit of background information about what happens in other road controlling authorities and national standards. So then slide number 3, why do we have traffic calming? Just some reasons there at the top. So traffic calming is not new. It's as old as the motor car. And in fact, when motor cars first came onto roads in some jurisdictions, a person had to walk in front of the motor car with a flag and make sure the motor car didn't exceed a certain speed limit so that horses and people weren't frightened or run over. So as cars have got faster and our communities got more populous, there is a need for more traffic calming in a way. So ideally, traffic moves through an area at sort of uniform speeds, and certainly at conflict points, people can make decisions about whether to cross the road or not. So common complaints that staff and I'm sure councillors have had from residents that traffic is too fast in my street. Children can't walk or ride to school because there's no safe places to cross the road. There's excessive traffic in my street. Why is it not staying on the main roads? Why is it coming through a quiet residential street? And the other one that we often get, there was another crash at the intersection last night where a car failed to give way and just went straight through and hit a car coming the other direction. And certainly in Cambridge, that's a common complaint with all of the crossroads intersections there. So then reasons for traffic calming can seem quite obvious around schools and other high pedestrian areas, and indeed in our Victoria Street and Alexandra Street, we have traffic calming there with gardens and the like, which makes for an attractive environment and town centre. So we also want to keep the right traffic on the right roads and give the appropriate levels of service to different types of traffic. And increasingly we see that subdivision developers want traffic calming within their subdivisions, and they're very actively building it, spending the extra money because residents want to live in streets where speeds are slower and their families are safer. So it's more and more common to see. So just on that next slide, some international examples there. Well, the top two is Auckland and Nelson, but then in the bottom two pictures we have in the UK where speed cushions are doing the job there in bollards and changed to the width of the street. And in Australia, in Victoria, there's chicanes which slow the traffic down on that street. So it is very common all around the world. So then what works well and what doesn't work? We know that narrowing the road, creating chicanes, from, I guess, detailed studies of different types of traffic calming, vertical deflection is one of the most effective ways to slow people down, platforms, humps and cushions. Of course, at intersections, roundabouts and traffic signals do the same job. And in our town centres, landscaping is another effective mechanism. We need it to be affordable and easily maintained. Things that don't work well, if we just put up a speed limit sign and some paint on the road, that might work for a very short time, but typically won't have a long-term effect. Rubber bumps can be used temporarily, but they do tend to fall apart after a year or two, depending on the traffic volume on them. But they're great for a short term and a low cost fix. From experience, very narrow traffic lanes and islands will often get damaged and lead to complaints from road users that it was unreasonably narrow and I've bent my wheel on it and things like that. So not the sort of thing we want to do. But then in terms of Waipa, what have we heard from our community about traffic calming? So certainly we've heard from residents, pedestrians and cyclists who enjoy the calmer street and safer streets. But we also hear from people who say, look, there's too much change. We're seeing too many of these things. They don't understand the need. They're all about their car journey, and so they're not thinking of any other road users. Some say the bump is too severe, that emergency services will be slowed. Some would rather we spent money on road maintenance and not on speed bumps or islands or anything else. We've had some, particularly if they've got cars that, dare I say it, have been lowered right down so that they just clear the road surface. They're concerned about damaging their vehicles. We hear from some who are not sure when they get to a pedestrian crossing point that's just a raised safety platform, whether they should give way to pedestrians or not. But indeed, that's not a bad thing. If they're unsure and they decide to stop for a pedestrian, particularly a young, vulnerable pedestrian or an older person, that's probably a really good thing. Then, of course, we've had some criticism when I think the Herald published a story about Auckland Transport's speed bumps and said it was costing $500,000. And then that myth was kind of repeated by politicians and got a whole lot of people thinking that that was the cost of them, when in fact Auckland Transport had provided lots of information to the newspaper showing that they were not that expensive at all. And they did print a retraction on page 5, a week later. But I guess the complicating factors...
Could I just make a little comment about uncertainty about where to give way to pedestrians? As most of you know, I have a son who lives in Canada, and on their suburban streets, if you even look like you're going to cross the road, no matter where, a car will stop for you and let you go. It just seems to be part of the culture. I'm not talking about the busy roads, but if you're in a suburban street, and as you say, that basically is a good thing. The pedestrians are the one who are vulnerable. So
yes, that's right. Absolutely. That the motorist who's driving 2 tons or 2.5 tons of steel, if they do pull up and stop for the young pedestrian, then that's the best thing. Yep. Okay, so I guess complicating factors. We do have in our growing towns, we have increasing traffic volumes with growth. We certainly need to increase walking and cycling and bus use to both provide equitable and sustainable transport modes for our communities. We obviously have car drivers who have had many, many years of priority infrastructure for them. So it's an adjustment that they're being asked to make, and some don't understand why. As I mentioned, we've certainly had some politicisation of traffic calming. And we've had issues around affordability and when we've had to do temporary works, and some in the community are not appreciative of anything that looks temporary. So those are complicating factors. So what does it cost? So it's quite variable depending on the scale, the traffic volumes. When we work in very busy streets like Cambridge Road and Shakespeare Street, we've got to do it all at night so that we can work around the traffic and put reasonable detours in place. Within subdivisions, they're often building this traffic calming out of concrete because they can close the road and have no traffic at all, and they can wait for 3 or 4 weeks for the concrete to set strong enough for traffic to then drive on it. But we're pretty much limited to using either a rubber preformed product or asphalt. And so Asphalt, when it comes out of the plant, it's heated to about 160, 170 degrees Celsius. And when they get it to the site, they've got to compact it when it's around 150 degrees Celsius. Otherwise, it'll set and they can't compact it. And of course, the asphalt is being placed for these speed tables often by hand because there's no paving machine invented yet, which can create a ramp. So we've got staff on the site tipping asphalt out of the back of a truck and leveling it with screeds and things at 150 degrees Celsius and then compacting it. And they've got to get that level just right because the asphalt, goes on this thick and it compacts down to this thick. So that difficulty of getting, just the right shape and then running the rollers over it and getting it to compact to the right shape. So it's quite tricky. And hence it does cost a bit of money.
Marie. Kia ora, Brian. I just want to ask one question because picking up on the bumps being severe stuff, there's a slowing bump outside the Glenview New World. If anyone's gone over that one there, that is marvelous, that one. And I'm wondering why we can't replicate that type of one across some of our areas because that one makes everyone slow down, but it just seems to have a much nicer on and off to the rest of them. I don't know.
Yes, yeah.
Have to agree, Del Marie. And it's almost like it's steep to get onto, but it's a nice, like a ramp off it. Seems to work quite well without the jarring approach.
Yeah, so I guess our Shakespeare Street one is more like that, and that we've got, and the standards which are listed in the back there with some links if people want to go and have a look. So the standards recommend if you're going to slow the traffic in a local street down to sort of 15 or 20 kilometres an hour so that kids can make judgments about getting across the road to school and things like that, then you've got to have steeper ramps because you really are trying to slow them down. But on a state highway like at Glenview, where there's a lot of buses and trucks, they've probably gone for the absolute flattest grade possible, which is good in that situation. There's, the bus stops each side, all the bollards and the traffic signals and everything there. So it's a bit of a different environment, but you could certainly travel over those bumps at 40 kilometres an hour or, in a big SUV, 50 kilometres an hour without slowing down much at all, which would not be ideal if you had a vulnerable road user who didn't push the button or the traffic didn't slow down for a red signal. Yeah. So certainly horses for courses. Yeah. So what does it cost? If we just do a very simple temporary rubber or small asphalt speed bump and we don't have to change the road width or footpath levels and things, we can do it for probably $20,000 or less. But by introducing this bump on the road, often it affects the drainage paths and the curbs each side. And then when we have to put in extra catch pits and pipes and things and maybe deal with vehicle crossings or other things, then the costs can escalate quite quickly. I think the one in Shakespeare Street, the value of the speed table and narrowing the lanes and things was, getting up to $100,000 worth of work.
Lou.
I just want to admit, with this traffic calming, I'm very much for it. But when we consider it, we've got to consider the different type of vehicles that operate on our road.
Yes.
And we've still got some smaller vehicles that are operating with tyres that are actually 13 or 14 inch. And they are much, much lower to the road. And they find that, whereas I've got a car with 21 inch wheels. So I navigate that quite easily.
Yes.
But
Yeah.
what I'm saying is
Yeah.
there's quite a variable. Put a little bit of a load in one of those cars and that standard speed hump does become quite an obstacle.
Right.
And just something to keep in the back of our minds when we're orchestrating these things. So,
Yeah.
it's something that as a mechanic, I do know that there's quite a big variation of vehicles.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think, if we get it right most of the time with that hot asphalt, then it should suit most vehicles. And but we have, we've identified some that the grades are not right and you see the odd scrape mark on them. So we have arrange with a contractor to, he's got a grinding machine which is used for grinding concrete. So we're going to trial that on one and see how well that works in terms of being able to just round off the edges and improve it.
It's just the
And if-
initial height.
Yeah.
It's just the initial height of entry that catches the car as it leaves and catches
Actually,
the tow
often,
bar or catches the,
yeah, often it's leaving. It's
Yeah,
the
leaving,
departure
yeah.
ramp
it's
where,
dropping down.
yeah,
Mm.
because they've come up the first one and the ramp table across, and then when they drop down, that's when they're more likely to catch. So yeah, those are the ins and outs of it. So how have we engaged with our community when we get requests, and we do get requests come in from schools, retirement villages. It can be linked to development. So a new subdivision's going in and they need a mechanism to be able to get from their new subdivision across a busy road to the footpath or something like that. So Frontier Road in Te Miru is one of those, with a big new subdivision and retirement village, footpath on the opposite side of the road. So they've got a crossing point. So generally we will be sharing those treatment options with the community boards and council before there's some community engagement. So certainly the big projects that have been running went to the community boards first, and the service delivery committee to look at the designs before they went out for community engagement. And then on those streets, they had letters delivered and they were invited to drop-in sessions to come and talk about the designs. And we've also shared our plans with the emergency services, and the emergency services have got a standard that they promote to local authorities when building traffic calming. So we have done our best to comply with that standard, and I'm pretty sure I have included that. Yes, it's a second background reading item there for an emergency report on traffic calming. So looking forward to the future, you know, how do we manage this activity better? You know, so ideally we can have good planning and good infrastructure that manages speeds, and certainly where new infrastructure is being built, that's what we're aiming to do. But it does all cost money. So we're often in the situation of dealing with existing problems that are coming up. We can have policies for traffic calming in certain situations, that sort of 80-20 rule, where like Auckland Transport have a policy document on speed platforms, have practice notes, determining what sort of grades, what sort of ramps and lengths for different types of traffic, which I think is a very useful sort of guide document. We can continue to educate the public about the needs and benefits of speed management, traffic calming. And we're certainly going to continue to refine the engineering work. So I think we've got better and better at it the more we've done it. A lot of our contractors are coming into it fairly new, and even some of the experienced contractors still will manage to get it wrong the first time. But as our population grows and the potential for resident and pedestrian vehicle conflicts increase, we'll need to have a common understanding and a good way of dealing with these issues. Just on the next slides there, I've just got some Waipawa examples. Obviously the top one is the Shakespeare Street, the trucks sort of passing over the crossing, and that's in the bottom left, we're looking at the crossing point for the pedestrians there. And we've certainly had good feedback from pedestrians using that crossing on a regular basis, how much safer they feel. Then in Bryce Street, top right, where we've got small roundabouts. So both the Alpha and Queen intersections on Bryce Street had regular crashes with people failing to stop or give way. So the raised sort of platforms and the mini roundabouts should put paid to future crashes. And the same for Rollison Street there in Kiki, again at a crossroads intersection that was did have some quite serious crashes at that location because of people failing to give way. So again, the crossings and the roundabout there will make improvement. Roger? Madam
Roger?
Chair? Oh, I've just got one last slide. Yep. And then, so this next one here in Thornton Road is basically a semi-permanent, part temporary. So we were called upon, new commercial business there, a lot more people crossing the street, but also a revamp of the playground in the Lake Te Akutu, meaning a lot more people were crossing the road here. So that traffic calming has worked well at a relatively low cost to improve that. Great big wide street, and otherwise people going pretty quick. But yeah, that is the end of the presentation, and happy to take questions.
Roger, then Philip.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks, Brian. Now, I've got 4 questions to ask, so can I request your forbearance on the time that this might take, as some of the questions do have references to specific materials. So if you bear with me on that. First one's actually quite a quick question, having said that, but I think that's an interesting presentation. To start with, can you outline to us what you are seeking as an outcome from this meeting?
Yes, I was asked to present information about traffic calming. So I hope that at the end of this, councillors are informed and had an opportunity to ask questions about traffic calming. Okay.
So you're not seeking any guidance or direction from council in terms of future management of calming?
More than education.
Okay. So second question, can I refer you to the information I sent to you, which unfortunately was declined to be included in your presentation? And I was given the reason why, but there was quite a bit of important information in there. However, all councillors have received it. Can I refer you to page 7 of your presentation, where you referred to emergency services being slowed? The email from Robert Hoss from Fire and Emergency Services outlines the impact of traffic calming on the timing of response, quality of outcomes for emergency victims, and negative impact on the integrity of emergency vehicles. In a survey of operation firefighters, and to quote, do traffic calming congestion measures cause undue, and I emphasize undue, delay in response to emergency incidents? And the response there from the officers was 100%. Yes. And do delays caused by traffic calming congestion measures increase negative outcomes for patients when responding to medical calls, heart attacks? They've got hangings and stabbings, and their response was 100%. In fact, all of the 15 questions that were asked of those emergency officers gave a high level of agreement of concern against traffic calming. Do you think that these responses would also be reflective of the Cambridge fire officers?
Yeah, I know that we've had conversations with the Cambridge fire officers. I think, Eric, you would have been at the last one. Do you have any feedback from them about traffic calming at all? Sorry to put you on the spot, but you were in the meeting with fire and ambulance and police, weren't you?
Yeah. So as part of the Cambridge Pathway project, we met with emergency services probably over a period of 2 or 3 years, several times, maybe even 4 or 5. And their main call-out corridor remains at Victoria Street. They prefer to exit from the, especially the fire service, Duke Street onto Victoria Street and into the call-out. And they prefer that road because of the wide shoulders and the cycle lanes. So there's lots of room for cars to pull over and pass. They wanted 2 lanes on the Bryce Street corridor of the cycleway, and they were happy with that and with the traffic calming that we had, because that wasn't their main call-out corridor. So that was kind of a backup for them. And then there was some discussion about some of their volunteers getting to the station quickly.
Yep.
And some of them, I think, still use Bryce Street. But the last 2 times we met with that emergency services group, that the issue wasn't raised.
Yeah, it's the feedback that I've had from local officers, particularly in regards to Cambridge Road, Hamilton Road, Kelly Road, those 3 in a row, is that has created the fact that they won't use that because it is just a risk to patients. And this is the St. John's as well as the fire department. So that has become quite a challenge because they've had to go longer way round, and time can be of the essence.
So they had discussed Cambridge Road with us, but it wasn't at that level of angst. They said, hey, it's a concern, and we have, like as Brian described, got a plan to alleviate some of those RSPs on Cambridge Road. But so at a staff level, we've never been alerted that they're not using it.
If I can just add there too, I mean, I attend the Cambridge Volunteer Fire Brigade awards evenings and things, and it's never been raised directly with me, although this recent meeting, the recent event I attended, they did raise the issue of the cheese cutters on the state highway causing some challenges in terms of their ability to get to accidents on the, using that. But so that has caused some problems, but that came with a rider that there's been a steep reduction in head-on collisions or accidents because of the cheese cutters. So that was something that they did raise with me, but not the other issues they've never raised with me.
Comment that was given to me was by a senior officer of St. John. But I'll just go on.
So a question on that, which I was going to ask, is so Cambridge Road there, C1 and 2, when the roundabout's done and the underpass is in, will some of those speed bumps be removed? So to have 3 speed bumps in it and controlled traffic lights and an underpass, is that an overkill? One or 2 of those can be removed?
Yeah, so certainly the Hugo Shaw Drive intersection has got a raised safety platform at the moment, and that was required as a temporary measure because that's the only way to turn right in or right out of that subdivision until the roundabout is built. But later on, once the roundabout is in place, that one could be removed if the right turn is banned. Yeah.
So potentially it could be 1 removed, still be 2.
Yeah, we would have the raised one at the signalised pedestrian crossing, but we certainly be open to reviewing the one that's across the town belt area. So what we'd like to do, obviously when we get to the end of the cycleway project, there's a monitoring and measuring and surveying process that we need to do to, I guess, see, well, both to report back to the council, but to NZTA on the use of the funding for the cycleway. And so we have got this in 2025, this monitoring, surveying exercise planned and reporting back. And we'll certainly be looking at the traffic calming measures and the speeds that people are actually travelling over them, and measuring the speeds with traffic counters, have traffic volumes changed as a result of the works. So we will be able to review, I guess, particularly Cambridge Road at that point and make decisions around, do we change things further?
Yeah, because Cambridge Road, Hamilton Road, that's a major arterial, and it's also a bus route. And there are a lot of authorities that actually don't allow speed humps on public transport routes. So, second question is, can I now move to refer you to page 9, when you say that the preferred plan shared with adjacent residents and community through letters and press releases. Now, in the Wilson Bryce Alpha project, I can't remember the name of it, but it doesn't matter, and I was involved with some of that consultation with you. And I refer you to the plan that we used, which was this one that went out. And actually on page 4 of those maps, it shows the Bryce Grey Hall section of Alpha Street. Now, that map that was used for consultation didn't include any reference in that section to speed humps. And actually in communication with Dawn, I just followed that up. And actually on that section, there was no traffic monitoring, no speed monitoring. There was no resident requests for speed mitigation. There was no prior consultation with affected parties such as the RDA. There was no evidence of safety or risk concerns. Well, there were 2 CRMs back in 2014. So I'm just wondering, how was the decision made to install those speed bumps in that road? It doesn't follow any of what you've said, like you refer to the residents or you discuss with residents. There doesn't appear to have been any of that done for the installation of those speed humps.
Yeah, no, it's quite possible that we missed a step there. It's when this project was kind of fast tracked in terms of development, apply for the funding from the government and then get on, and originally it had to be built and complete by 30th of June 2024. So it was rush. And we had the concept design initially that we went out and shared with the public, but the detailed design plans weren't completed till later. So yeah, we may well have missed a step. We know, obviously, when the Riding for Disabled did contact us, they had concerns about the speed bump or the raised safety platform, but also the visibility coming out of the entranceway. So we were certainly able to fix the visibility issue for them.
I can tell you that there's been considerable reaction from the residents as well, because they see absolutely no need for speed humps on that road, either from volume or speed. So that's an important step that you actually missed. Now, on page 13, you provide additional reading, traffic calming initiatives and devices, etc. But looking at a New Zealand perspective, there are a number of local communities and authorities that are having heated discussions over speed bumps. And I just look at Auckland, Queenstown, Hamilton, Welcome Bay, Tauranga, and that's just a few of them. I believe there's considerable Cambridge community, and I'm talking about Cambridge because, you know, that's where there are a lot now of speed bumps, negativity over our current speed bump installation. Now, Queenstown Council went so far as to develop their own speed bump policy, recording limitations and conditions. So there was a policy that you had to go through before a speed bump was accepted. Now, coincidentally, although you have mentioned a lot of the positives of speed bumps, in their policy, they actually do identify the negatives to a community of speed bumps. An increase in noise, and you've accepted that with cars, vehicles and commercial vehicles hitting the speed bumps. Nuisance value to law-abiding motorists. Creating problems for emergency vehicles, buses and heavy traffic, particularly if too steep or too high. And we've actually identified on Hamilton Road and on Alpha Street, where in fact the speed bumps are too high. Increased exhaust emissions and fuel consumption through acceleration and deceleration. Encouraging motorists to use alternative routes which may not be appropriate, so they're being forced to use local roads. Damaging some vehicles. For this reason, they should only be used on low speed roads and limited in size. Reducing the carrying capacity of the road. In some cases being a traffic hazard on corners, not clearly visible, interfering with road drainage, etc. Interfering, well, we don't have this, snow removal, that was particularly South Island. Encouraging gutter running to avoid the effects of speed hump. Would you consider perhaps a Waipa District Council speed hump policy so that we can lay down some guidelines and some conditions for speed humps? Because it is a community concern.
Through you, Madam Chair, certainly that's something I mentioned on my slide. How do we engage with the community? That we could have policies and better planning and everything to manage this sort of activity. But I guess for our towns, Te Awamutu and Cambridge, we actually have relatively low levels of traffic calming and speed tables compared to those other cities you mentioned. Auckland, Hamilton, Tauranga. I worked in Tauranga for 10 years and built a lot of traffic calming devices in Tauranga and around the Mount. And, you know, they, as a city, they suffer with boy racers racing round and round, but also really high traffic volumes in a tourist sort of town that just made the lives of residents miserable. So they did certainly go all out and do a lot of traffic calming. And we've seen Auckland and Hamilton, other big cities have often done that to a much bigger scale than we have here at Waipa. But you know, certainly what you mention is that whole, those issues, what do the public think? What do the fire service think? They are all sort of change management issues that, because often the case once, you know, traffic calming has been in a street or an area for many years, it just becomes background, a background issue, you know, so it's, yeah, I certainly agree we need to make sure we get it right. And if anything we build is not right, we need to get to correct it. But I would caution against sort of drawing a line under this or drawing a line through this important sort of safety tool and speed calming tool that a lot in the community will actually grow to like or enjoy in their street.
Did you read the Queenstown policy?
I did have a look at it, yes.
Yes.
That's right. So I know Queenstown, I mean, for many years, they probably had zero speed calming and a lot of tourists, a lot of traffic. Yeah. Well, you know what it's like there. If you visited in sort of peak tourist season, it can be bumper to bumper and traffic is going through all sorts of streets that it probably shouldn't to try and get around congestion. So I can well imagine that they've had to implement some speed calming.
I'm just going to pass on to you that I think from what I'm gathering from the community, there is concern over the policy and they would like to be ensured that there's some control over the plethora of speed humps and speed mitigations that are being introduced in Cambridge. So it is a big concern over there. So perhaps you may give another thought to perhaps developing a policy
Thanks,
we
Roger.
can contribute to.
I've got Bruce and then Andrew. I'm just really mindful of the time. We only had a set time for this because we have another workshop afterwards. So Bruce, the floor is yours.
Gentlemen, this is quite an easy one, a Harpo State Highway 3. When the pavement's rehabilitated, because it's pretty bad at the moment, will that calm the bars? Like they are quite severe at the moment. I thought you said they lay a big bit. Would that maybe smooth them in the future?
There's certainly the approach as you're heading north has got a bit of a dip in the pavement in front of the speed table, which will be improved when they've finished their pavement works. The two smaller bumps each side, they have to take those out when they do the pavement work and they'll put them back again, but they've got opportunity to maybe smooth them a little bit more. But interestingly, if you're there watching traffic crossing them, big trucks and buses, and I've ridden the bus over them many times, they feel very smooth and the trucks are not having to slow down to a crawl or anything. So the big vehicles are going over them, no trouble. Cars are slowing right down because, as Lou was saying, with those smaller cars, they feel it a bit more. So I think on balance, they're actually working pretty much as they are intended.
Yeah, no, I haven't got any complaint with them. I think that they're fantastic, but when you compare what Dale Marie said about Glenview, I think that's a 25 and I think they are 25s from memory. There's a total different experience. I know the one at Glenview is a lot longer, but these are shorter, but yeah, it's not.
Cheers, Bruce. Andrew, then Mike.
I'll be I'll be quick. Look, I'm not a fan of speed bumps, all right? I think they're, but unfortunately, they're necessary. I'm not a fan of them because many of the things Roger has said are absolutely right, particularly fuel usage and whatever. But if we were compliant with our road signs, we wouldn't need speed bumps and traffic calming at all. We're not, so quid pro quo. And look, there's like lots of things. There's give and take. Because we have speed bumps, cars are going slower, less pedestrians and cyclists are getting run over and knocked off their bikes. So there's maybe a reduction in emergency service need to some extent. Fully accept that, when emergency services are required, they're being slowed by them too. I mean, it's give and take. But being a bit specific, the speed bumps on Whitmore Street and Kiki seem to be particularly vicious. Is there any comment on that, Brian?
Yes, there's two locations there, again, on that departure ramp that we've got our eye on that we want to smooth a bit. Yep.
Thanks, Brian. Mike, just before we round this one up.
Thank you, through the chair. Hey, thanks for this workshop and also for holding it off. I was in China last month, I think. And so it's actually good to be involved. So first of all, thanks for all the work that's gone into this. And look, a lot of it has come off the back of these new cycling and cycleways in particular. Andrew, you made some good points about if we actually adhered to the rules, we wouldn't be having this conversation, but unfortunately people don't. Some of these things like the speed cushions, I think are absolutely great, and though they look temporary, they actually seem to be lasting, like on Thornton Road there. They definitely do slow traffic down at a very low cost. I guess picking up on Roger's points, if I liken it to wheelchair access, wheelchair access, there is a standard. It's not like do what you want sort of thing. There's a standard to the slope over distance. So I think what Roger's asking for maybe, and I would totally support that, rather than this speed bump's great and this one, these two aren't, and then we go and mitigate it afterwards, if the contractors had a standard for the type of road, because I'm hearing that too, like different types of road would have different standards because you need to slow traffic down more or less. Could that sort of be developed? So then when the methodology or the standard came to the contractor, it's like, this is what it needs to make the egress and the coming on, coming off and the height. And because it seems to me the technical bit is not the platform, but the entrance and the exit, because it's a live thing we're dealing with. But there's obviously ways to mitigate it, either during it or after it.
Through you, Madam Chair. No, you're absolutely spot on. And that Auckland Transport document, Council could just say, well, that's the standard we'd like to have. It's perfectly good. And it talks about the different types of traffic and the different slopes of ramps. The complicating factor, which is what I mentioned earlier, it's making that ramp out of asphalt, which is at 150 degrees. So you can't get too close to it because it's going to burn you even if without touching it. And the fact that our roads are not, when they draw an engineering drawing and they show a grade like this, but our road is not perfectly flat. Our road has got a shape on it like this across the cross section if you cut through it. So you've got a ramp which you're trying to make it follow that shape a bit and keep a constant grade where it's coming down to meet a different level of the road across the width of the road. So it's actually a lot more complicated than it looks. So yeah, certainly that's why our contractors are coming to grips with it to find out, what works and what doesn't. And yes, we do give them plans and grades and things that they've got to work to, but it's really quite difficult to get it spot on. But we're getting better at it. Our contractors are getting better at it.
Yeah, I guess what it would do is would just, the public are really interested in the end result. Unfortunately, not the engineering part or the construction. They're just paying for the result. So I guess something like Auckland or an adaptation of that would give the end result to the residents. And I guess what's brought this up is not that maybe compared with other towns or cities, we have got too many or not enough, or actually we haven't got that many compared with others. It's more maybe the point in the speed that they've come online because of the cycleways largely. And I think people are a bit concerned is this the end of it? Is this the beginning? Is this, the beginning of what might come? What controls do we have? And I think that's what we're hearing out in the community. So yeah, just a couple of thoughts there. One around the methodology, whether that's a policy or methodology, and the other is just that would actually then give that methodology or policy, the public some assurance that these are the sorts of roads and these are the sorts of conditions that would a speed, not a speed bump, but speed reduction options would be looked at.
Thanks, Mike. Last comment, Philip.
Okay, thank you. I'll try and keep it brief. So Taylor Street in Grosvenor outside the high school there, and Thornton Road opposite the new Foursquare, and the playground's been there forever. So those temporary rubber mats or whatever there, so one question is, when would you decide to put chicanes in there rather than bumps, or in any place? And is there money in the budget to do something more permanent there? Because obviously the school's going nowhere, Foursquare and playground on Thornton Road are going nowhere. I mean, they're there to stay forever, sort of thing. So yeah, so when do you decide chicanes or bumps? And secondly, is there something there for something more permanent?
Yeah, I guess that, when do you decide chicane or a bump? It really is the particular road environment and what you're trying to achieve and what the constraints might be in terms of the existing width of the road, where vehicle crossings and things are. So I couldn't say, just today whether chicanes would be a good idea for either of those locations without thinking about it in more detail. But in terms of when would we make them permanent, I think next month we'll have a paper to council about road improvement budgets, and that would be a good opportunity to talk about, funding and what's possible in the future.
Yeah, so both those roads aren't your typical sort of urban streets where some of the back streets are more urban, where they're a lot quieter. They're quite busy ones. So, yeah.
Cool. Okay, thank you, gentlemen. Thank you for that. And so with that said, we'll bring that workshop to a conclusion and move on to the next one, which is yours in any event, Eric. Setting speed limits, overview of the new speed setting rule.
Thank you, Madam Chair and councillors. Right. So, okay, the purpose of this workshop is to explain the new rule we have regarding setting the speed limits. We want to, I guess, discuss any council community priorities and talk about funding timing for any changes. So the background, it's been a bit of a tricky situation that there was a rule published in 2022, and now we have, 2 years later, we've got another rule. There are differences. So we've kind of spent 2 years doing almost nothing. We've done lots of planning in the background, but yeah, no actual implementation or consultation. The last set of changes were made in December 2019, when council did, I think, around 200 changes. And these changes are not affected by the new rule. They missed that deadline by, I think, a couple of months. So yeah, so there's no change in what we've done to date. So what's changed? So district-wide speed management plans are now optional. There's no requirement for regional or Waikato Regional Council coordination or planning. The new rule gives a lot better guidance on what the appropriate speeds for different roads should be. There's a simpler process for changing or setting speed limits. The school speed limits are a lot clearer, sort of more clarity and guidance, and not really changed, but our previous, well, our current speed limit bylaw is now redundant and can be revoked. And it'll be a subject of a future paper, yeah.
Okay, cool. I was just trying to reconcile that with the earlier statement that the speed limits under that previous bylaw were unchanged. I'm just trying to reconcile those in my small brain.
So the last changes in December 2019 were completed, I recall, under that bylaw, but the new land transport rule did talk about revoking some recent changes for all road controlling authorities, but we've missed that. So those changes were made in December 2019 are not impacted by the new rule.
So the differentiation here is that changes are not revoked, that they're fine, but the actual bylaw is redundant.
Yes. Yeah.
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 Yeah, I can
The
clarify,
lawyer
Madam
and me
Chair.
struggling with that.
Yeah, I can clarify, Madam Chair. Yeah, so once the
No
bylaw.
bylaw, then what, how are the
Yes,
restrictions?
I can clarify,
effective?
Madam Chair. So once upon a time, the bylaw with its maps and schedules was, with council's seal on it, was the absolute record of the speed limit. And so if police were prosecuting somebody and they wanted to go back to the evidence of where the speed limits were, from and to, they would go to the bylaw document. But since the 2022 speed limit setting rule, all council's bylaw information, maps and schedules have been uploaded into a national speed limit register, which is a mapping tool online. And so that becomes the authoritative record of speed limits. So a bylaw is no longer needed for that record.
Cool, thank you for that explanation. I was struggling in my head on that.
Okay. So there's two ways we can change speed limits. We can do a district-wide speed management plan and get it approved by NZTA, or we can do discrete individual changes with NZTA approval.
So, thank you. So when you say discrete changes, a couple of slides back, it said it made a lot simpler. How's it? I mean,
So previously we had to work through a speed management plan, which no, we don't, yeah, because a speed management plan tends to be district-wide, and then you have to talk about the issues at a district-wide level. Whereas now we can just basically respond to a specific issue individually without considering any other part of the district.
So a question we've had before is, say, Thornton Road, going past Oaklands out that way, 50 Ks, which seems to be really slow along there compared to other urban streets, which It's big and wide and et cetera, et cetera. So how simple would it be able to get that changed to 60 Ks, say? Before you had to go down through a whole heap of loops.
So if I could just carry on, we described it a bit further into the presentation.
Yeah, how about we just let the gentleman carry on? Sorry, I interrupted you because I was trying to get my head around the revoking and sticking, but how about we just go through the chunkier bits in terms of how they can be changed?
So before we can make any change, we have to do a cost benefit analysis that considers safety impacts, travel time impacts, and the cost of implementation. We have to consult in accordance with Section 82 of the Local Government Act. We've got to comply with NZTA and government policy statement guidance, and there's lots of technical requirements in the new rule, detailed technical requirements. And then a big part of the new rule is regarding speed limits outside schools. So the 2022 rule did have mandatory speed limits, but these are now better defined. So category 1 schools, which are urban ones, have a mandatory 30 km/h speed limit. Category 2, which is rural schools, a mandatory 60 km/h speed limit, and these are variable, as I'll describe later. And then there's a specified length of these speed limits in reference to how you access the school as a pedestrian. And there are some exemptions in terms of surrounding existing speeds. The speed limit outside schools, it's only during school travel periods, which is when the school's open and for a period before and after that opening and closing of the school. There's a requirement for us to comply by 1 July 2026 for these new limits. And some of our existing urban schools already have a variable 40 km/h speed limit, and these are not required to be changed. But we may, there might be power in the consistency of a 30, but I guess that'll come out in the consultation. So in terms of our priorities, so we have to comply with the rules regarding schools. We have received quite a lot of community requests to lower some speed limits, also from the police. And as we respond to growth in our urban areas, we had to do some changes based on growth of our towns. So the other key takeout is NZTA has not provided any funding for these requirements. Our costs will depend on, especially in relation to schools, how many schools are impacted. Some schools are close together and that low speed zone may connect between schools. There's a lot of consultation required. Which will need a lot of staff effort, and then a physical works required is to be confirmed as well. And we have limited funding for this, and I think,
Paper next month will cover.
Yep. So the paper next month will deal with that. And the next step is, so I guess staff, we want to prepare a paper to service delivery in the new year that provides options and some decisions for approval. And then, we can implement those approved limits. Or I guess when I say implement, start the consultation process on those proposals.
Thanks, Eric. Roger.
Thanks. You were, I'm not too sure this is a question for you or for Mike. Because when you look at the placement of Cambridge Primary and you draw a 300-metre ring around 45 minutes before, 45 minutes after opening time, how is that going to be policed? Because, I mean, It's right in the middle of town.
So through the chair, so there is ambiguity in the rules. So is it 300 metres from the gate in both directions, or is it centred on 300 metres? So 150 plus. So that's not clear. Our proposal is, well, what we will do at staff level, we'll consult with other road controlling authorities and NZTA and get clarity on the new rules. And there's some other councils which have got some pretty significant issue with the new rules. So the clarity will come over the next 6 months to a year.
Not going to be easy. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mike.
Thank you through the mayor. Yeah, I thought that would be the answer there. There has to be some common sense around that, around schools that are in the middle of towns and things. Look, Hautapu Road, which I guess Hautapu School has made contact there, and yeah, that whole straight, just as a specific example, those schools like that, when the time comes, I'm sure a reduction will be hopefully imminent. My question really though is actually around the papers coming to us next month. What's coming back to us at the start of next year? The paper, and then the consultation period starts on whatever.
So the service delivery paper with recommendations on how we proceed. And I guess what we can talk about some of the thinking today. Yeah, and it's probably not so much, I think the schools, we're in a set regime with the rule, but the likes of Hautapu Road, Liam Street, Racecourse Road, there's actually it's probably a dozen other hotspots where the request has been for reductions of speed limits, and how we deal with those in our constrained funding environment.
Yeah. So I guess my question is around those specifics is just, is there going to be a time frame with consultation to get whatever the end result is into the next LTP? Is that the goal to put forward into the next LTP for consideration? Will it be in time?
Yeah, certainly I'd say that will be part of it, but the current 3-year funding block that we're in to 2027, we'll have we've got some requirements where the rule says we must use reasonable efforts to lower speed limits at schools. I think most of our rural ones are going to be okay. They've already got the 60 in place, but our urban schools are largely 40. And so in this remaining 2.5 years, will we lower the speed limits at the schools to 30? It talks about they have to be variable, and of course with 40 we don't have variable signs, they're just fixed 40 speed signs, and all this sort of scientific evidence is if you just put up a sign that says go at 30 morning and afternoon, people won't comply with that, but we know if you put up an electronic sign that flashes the bright 30 at the right time of day, then people will generally comply because they can see it. But we won't have the funds to do electronic signs.
All right. So that's sort of just my last comment. That sort of ties into a comment that was in that last conversation that basically if something doesn't make sense, people really won't follow it. Or you've got to give them some additional influence. So the speed signs would be one thing, but again, this could almost tie back into that last conversation of that methodology and policy of traffic calming could be part of, rural schools, but not just rural schools. I'm not talking schools here. I'm just talking where it makes sense to slow traffic. A speed sign is one of the mitigations, but that policy could include other mitigations. Would that be possible to explore?
Yeah, so certainly through you, Madam Chair, around the country where local authorities have over the last 5 years or more, put in 30s at schools, they've either included electronic signs or a combination of electronic signs and traffic calming devices to make sure they got speeds down to the 30.
Thank you.
Yeah, Philip and then Lou.
Yeah, I mean, Goodwood School is actually working really well, and it's really effective. I mean, there's a lot of people going through there that are dropping their kids off, so they're conscious of it and they're slowing down. There's a lot of people go through there when they go to work every morning. I go through there when I'm coming here. But you got the flashing lights. It's got 60 Ks because there's a bit of a village there anyway, but you got the flashing lights during school hours, like what you said. But there's no chicanes, there's no bumps, there's no nothing, but it does seem to work really well, and you certainly don't hear of any incidents, which is great, which is fantastic. We don't want to hear incidents, but I mean, Hautapu is another one. It hasn't got the village around it like Goodwood has. Tamero is also the same too. It's got the village. But it is certainly working really well. But yeah, and it's really simple. It looks simple anyway.
Lou?
Yeah, thank you through me. Just a quick observation more than anything. In the rural schools, a lot of the rural schools are actually around a community hub. Okay, and the 60 Ks that are standard at the moment actually operate very effectively for the community. And having them actually opened up only for the 45 minutes either side is probably not the best option for the local people. You've got a local hall there, I'll use Pahui, for example, which I'm very conversant with. You've got a kindergarten, you've got a hall, and you've got a school. You go out to Waipapa, a similar sort of situation with halls, and these sort of areas. I've ridden through there on motorbikes and cars and all sorts of things, and you tend to slow, whether it's a Sunday or not. You see the 60 K. It operates as a safety factor for a place where kids go to play during the weekends, do things. So I'm going to ask another question: is that there would be a significant cost to our council if we have to implement the signage or something to change these to a limited time. And that would have to come into our LTP, wouldn't it? As I say, and has anyone done any costing or any ideology or, what that's going to actually cost?
No, not at this stage. I guess this rule was signed in at the end of September, so we haven't had a lot of time to think about it. And we were also advised at the same time that NZTA had cut all funding for road improvements and safety improvements, including for speed management. So we have heard that NZTA is reconsidering that if they want local authorities to do speed management, then they'll probably have to come up with some money. So we're waiting to hear from them whether they'll be able to do that. But I guess that's why when we come back to council with an option paper, it'll be around, what sort of timing, what sort of funding will we have available? What are our recommended requirements? And therefore, how would we prioritise that work? Because there will be limited funds and limited staff time to implement this. Yeah. But fortunately, the rule does say that if the school is within, like for our rural schools like Puahui and Timero and others, if they're already in an area which has a lower speed limit for a good reason, and it's supported by the rule, then there's a good chance we wouldn't have to make any change to the rural school speed limit. So,
just to advertise a little bit further, if you go to Rotorangi, which is on a sharp turn by a building, the speed limit there operates very effectively for people to slow for that intersection and that sharp corner, and it does a good job. So, as I say, in keeping that.
But just brief little statement. I mean, I've said it before and it's probably controversial, but, it's the locals that speed through these areas. It's not so much the visitors, it is locals. And I've been involved with Tamero for a long time, and I know it's locals and they've got to take a big responsibility here. I'm a local.
Great. So have you got the the guidance that you required from us? And I take it we're looking towards, as you mentioned before, a paper which will come back to Claire's committee in the new year for options.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And if you had any thoughts around timing as when you'd want consultation for any speed limit changes you do want to proceed with. I know there's a local body election next year, and sometimes controversial consultation is not ideal and that sort of time frame. But
yeah, I think it's probably more a case of saturation
Yes.
and
Yeah.
capacity between now and certainly embedding an LTP. So, yeah, my sense is that it's a very cluttered landscape at the moment, or will be going forward around consulting with our communities. So, yeah, I wouldn't, from my part, I wouldn't be busting a boiler to get it as a matter of urgency. I mean, there's the whole cost issue too. Appreciating that there are calls from the communities in certain places for reductions. I think we just have to be cognizant of engagement, community engagement, saturation. It's what we've got coming forward. Philip.
One thing you tried to highlight or highlighted was it's going to be simpler, so time will tell whether it is simpler.
True.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. No, thank you, Madam Chair. That was valuable.
Wonderful. Thanks very much, gentlemen. And that brings us to a conclusion for today's council workshops. And we will be back again at 1 o'clock for Finance and Corporate.